Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to remarkable people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. And we're recording this program on location. We're actually backstage at the Earth Centre in Hackney, where tonight Damon Albarn's band, The Good, The Bad and The Queen, will be on stage. And Damon has joined us in the little sort of sofa area.
Yeah, I think this might be our dressing room.
Before you go on. How do you feel on days like this?
It's a little time before I go on.
I mean, you're presumably going on to sound check or something,
Yeah,
are you?
sound check.
You're playing tonight with The Good, The Bad and The Queen, which is one of your many musical projects. You're one of the busiest, most hardworking musicians I've ever come across. And, you know, we think of you as Blur and Gorillaz and Good, The Bad and The Queen and the Syrian Orchestra and all these different projects. I mean,
But remember, in all of them, I'm only just one part of
you are one part of them. But you're often the driving force in a lot of these projects.
Well, I've definitely usually got something kind of sort of, hopefully I can contribute something to each thing I kind of arrive in. And sometimes it really is that random, you know, it's not sort of, I don't kind of sit at home like envisaging things in that way. I just kind of, I really respond on a daily basis to my mood and how that sort of expresses itself through music. And then you know, if you meditate on something for a certain period of time, that sort of becomes a thing, I suppose. You know, but the actual processes are very much a day-to-day.
Do you have to switch between
I'm a
one thing
day-to-day
and
kind of person.
Because, you know, with this one, you know, you just finished Gorillaz,
Yes.
then you go straight into this, and it's a very different kind of...
Well, you know, I recorded the records back to back at the beginning of the year. I did the Gorillaz one in February, and I did the Good, the Bad and the Queen in March. So that was kind of... You'd have thought that would have been very strange, but it was just actually really great to sort of do things that's so different. And, you know, I've been thinking about this for a long time, as have Paul and Simon and Tony. You know, we haven't stopped playing for 12 years.
All of us who listen to your music and love it, and I'm one of those, know what we get out of your music. What do you get out of your music now? 30 years after you first began Blur.
The same thing. Well, that almost kind of childlike wonder that something has just happened. You know, that's a very important part of it. You see, that's the thing. You realise that it was all there all along. Everything that you have. It's just a case of being able to recognise it, especially when it comes to creativity. So being creative is something that you're given. You know, it's just part of those weird little chemical things that happen in
things
brains.
That get doled out.
Yeah, exactly. But then, so I suppose what's interesting about that is the way how that creativity as a sort of human condition responds to, you know, its environment and keeps on doing that. And, you know, that's the truth of it all, really.
But there's something different about you, because a lot of musicians have a thing that they do, and they do it over and over again for decades and decades.
Yes.
You move a lot,
Yeah,
and you change what you're doing a lot.
I remember when I first got someone put the word dilettante next to my name a long time ago, and I didn't know what it meant. And when I I'm a dilettante.
Maybe that's good.
Ooh, yeah, maybe that's good. Yeah, and then I realised that it was a very kind of sort of double-edged compliment. You know what I mean? And I suppose what I read from that was that, you know, it has to be coming from within you for it to work. If you keep changing and you know, it can become, you're a diletante, but I'm not.
But you're not, because all your musical projects are serious.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. So when I realised that it wasn't, that didn't actually apply to me, I was okay about it again.
When did you know you wanted to be a musician?
I've always liked music, so I suppose I've always been a musician. I think it's something you become.
But you went to acting
are
school at some point, didn't you?
Well, I do like the stage a little. I'm not adverse to a musical. I never really got much further than that.
But did you want to be an actor? Was that a thought?
I definitely wanted to be a something. You know.
Have you done what you wanted to do?
Well, I'm doing what I want to do.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I hope it's not the end. Like a day to day, it's great. I've got to not really working till the afternoon, so I've got to get a Christmas tree, put the Christmas tree up, do a bit of hoovering.
But the thing is, I've interviewed you many times over the years. I know you're very political and serious and thoughtful, and you kind of care and about lots of different things.
I do. Well, I get exasperated when things that seem really obvious are kind of don't seem obvious to other people. But I think that's why that's called caring, isn't it? I suppose, with one form of caring.
How comfortable?
But it's a dangerous position because sometimes it can be interpreted as being maybe dare I say a part of the liberal malaise that we keep getting told we're part of.
Do you worry about being part of that?
Of a malaise. Well, I think it's self-evident that if I would class myself as a liberal. I think it's really unfortunate how much it has revealed the shortcomings of liberalism, this whole affair, and the sort of terrible arrogance that's clearly kind of accompanied this idea about looking outwards and all of the fine liberal ideals. There's a basic kind of abandonment of a social contract between us all, and that's why we're where we are now. So, as I've said to you before, it's not so much that Brexit has happened; it's the question that was posed was the wrong one.
How comfortable are you expressing these things as someone who's principally a musician?
Yeah.
Do you feel it's your job as well?
Well,
to
it's
say
not my job
think?
all the time. Like for example, I was doing the Andrew Marr show last weekend, and Tony Blair came into my dressing room. Now, I haven't seen Tony Blair since he called me up to one of Parliament's towers and gave me a sort of benignly conspiratorial kind of talking to about
New Britain.
New Britain, precisely. And it's documented that I snubbed the invitation that came subsequently from that imagining of a new Cool Britannia or whatever they want to call it. And then I was very vocal, with the Iraq Peace March. And I was one of those 2 million people that saw that protest completely ignored by the government at the time.
And you said that you felt Tony Blair was a sort of a sinister kind of presence when you met him all those years ago.
I know. So all of those things follow, and they very kindly invited me several times. This private thing, round for dinner, and I'd never sort of had the. I just felt that was just a kind of sort of an alliance that however I saw it, it was just something I should avoid. So seeing him again, the point being is that politics and kind of being a human being are not necessarily the same thing. And as a human being, I was quite happy to say, hey, Tony, and I would be interested in hearing what what his perspective on it, because I'm still utterly bewildered by why we thought that was a good idea to bomb Iraq. Just because of what's happened as a result of it, it just seems like that was tactically. Even if you're going to go right to that sort of level of conversation was kind of sort of just not the right thing to do. And you know, are we making the same sort of just bad decision again? And then I'm conflicted again because he's kind of on the same side as me, and I've just listened to him give a very compelling argument for why we should remain. So how do you explain all of that? And that's a real history of a relationship when someone just turns up in the room and you've got like 3 minutes to say hi. So basically, you don't talk about Iraq or the whole thing. You just say, "Hey, how you doing?"
But do you find
to see
yourself
you again, you know, which it was nice to see him again.
But do you find yourself reappraising your view of him because you agree with him on Brexit?
I agree with a lot of. That's why I agreed to meet him in the first place. There's just some stuff, and they were just quite heavy-handed back then. You know, they had kind of sorts of lieutenants who came out and, you know, hung around and told you don't say that or whatever. You know, back then, little bit. But I don't want to accuse anyone. I'm sure everyone does that. It's just my only experience. You know, it's called a whip, isn't it? In Parliament.
In politics, yeah.
In politics, it's called a whip. So there were minor whips whipping people like myself at that time. But, you know, maybe that's good. Maybe because that's an inclusive politics where, I mean, it's questionable whether, like, a sort of someone in their early 20s who's just realised that the whole world is fucking brilliant is the best person to ask about anything to do with, you know. So I suppose all of those experiences have led me to where I am now as someone who does, like, you know, try and think things through and give some sense of perspective when I talk about them. If that's of any use, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure people tell me to shut up, and do tell me to shut up.
Do they? I mean, I wonder, because you have been very outspoken on Brexit. You know, you've talked about how old people have stolen the future of young people. That's a very controversial thing to say.
That's true. But I still believe in listening to your elders. So I am literally a walking paradox.
So do people pick fights with you over this?
No, I've just had a little bit of I've had one guy in the gigs that we've done. So I've had one guy accuse me of patronising him, and that was up in the northeast. One guy, and so it's been thousands who have.
That's a pretty good record.
Well, if it was a referendum, I would hope it would be recognised as a legitimate.
But how do you feel now? I mean, we're sitting here sort of right on the edge of this great sort of parliamentary vote over the next few days, and it feels like the future of the country is really at stake.
Well, I can tell you what the future of the country is. I've known what the future of the country is since the day of the referendum. Is that we need to have pose another question, and you know it should be stay in the EU, hard Brexit, stay in the EU, hard Brexit, or deal, or I don't know. Is there another one?
No, that's basically it.
Yeah.
And just give people a choice.
Yeah, just give people a choice.
And would you go out there and argue a case?
I am arguing a case for what I'm doing, but it's an abstract case, and it's more like a sort of bad acid trip, kind of in a fairground at the end of a pier falling into the sea, kind of political message. But
are you much more comfortable doing that? What you're doing with this album?
Well, I'm a musician. I'm not a politician, so you know.
But I remember talking to you a while ago and saying, you know, if you'd have known that the referendum was going to go the way it had gone, do you think you'd have been out there and been more vocal?
Oh,
you said yes.
Well, yeah, in some way or another. But I mean, what it was then and what it is now, it's just so much more. It's revealed itself as being, you know, in a way, it's like it's a really big kind of honesty session for a country. You know, everyone's just got to really dig deep and be honest to each other. Really honest to each other.
Well, what do
about
you
the
think?
things that matter and about, you know, all of these populist arguments are all well and good, but they have to carry a responsibility to the planet within their message, and they very rarely do, because because that negates what a lot of the messages of populism are actually trying to reassure people that they're not going to get forgotten, and that they have got a voice, and that they matter, and that they need to be listened to, which they absolutely do. But Trump, there's no sort of kind of sensitivity to the whole of the world within Donald Trump's kind of rantings, is there, really? Yeah. I've never seen any yet.
But if you're going to dig deep and be honest about what's going on, listening to people is a huge part of that. Clearly, yes. People who've been ignored and not listened to. But also, do you have to confront some of the more unpleasant things that are going on? Do you have to say, actually, there's quite a lot of xenophobia and there's quite a lot of racism?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And just because people also worry about losing identity and are prepared to sacrifice economics to retain identity, and on the flip side, obviously, you get the liberal kind of sort of applaud the liberals if they're prepared to pay more taxes. Same sort of thing, isn't it? It's something more than money. So populism is more than money.
We're all prepared to be poorer for something we believe in.
If we've all, it's just what is it that we believe in? That's what we need to find out, and then we'll be fine. I don't think we're totally sure what it is that we believe in.
But do you feel you're edging towards it though? Because you've gone out as part of this record and tried to understand parts of the country that you didn't really know before.
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, I don't want to make it. I've been everywhere, because I haven't. I tried to make, we tried to make a beautiful record that was strangely haunting and of the moment, and I think that's what we've done. Throw in a bad acid trip and you're there. Or two.
Your daughter, though, is of voting age now, isn't she?
Yeah.
So how do you feel about her future?
Well, I know that her generation just couldn't fathom why anyone would want to leave Europe. Make any sense to them. But, she has grown up in liberal London, after all.
Do you think that generation will overturn whatever's happening now?
Well, I think we'll all overturn it, because we're going to be given another opportunity.
You think we will?
Oh, definitely. We're always going to be given an opportunity. No one actually wants to leave Europe, because that's not what the problem is. The problem is something bigger than that, and leaving Europe is not going to help that. In fact, it's going to constrain us for so many years to even be part of the bigger question, just because of all the ridiculous bureaucracy. I mean. I know. One of Mrs. Friends was like a commercial bigwig lawyer. These probably haven't been home for 2 years. I mean, it's boomtown for lawyers, right? Lawyers are buying Porsches.
But none of this stuff that should have been talked about for the last 2 years has been talked about by any politicians,
right,
who are at the top.
Well,
so this conversation hasn't even begun. The conversation that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy. Don't you think that's crazy?
Yeah, I think it's terrible. Not just crazy.
I know, but with Theresa May, she was a Remainer. So how anyone thought that she was going to do anything other than just slow everything down to a point where it became obvious it would not work. I don't buy all this kind of. I've got the best possible. I don't think she ever wanted us to have a deal in the first place. She knows that,
You think she's done it on purpose?
Yes, I do.
But what I'm saying...
I don't think she's done it on purpose. I think subconsciously she couldn't help but do this, because she never believed in it in the first place. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's not a militant in those terms, and thank God she isn't a militant. I mean, imagine if we had Jacob Rees-Mogg, just, I mean,
But it's often taken artists or musicians through
he
history.
has a particular cadence in his voice that really cadence. No, I mean, if anyone ever sounded condescending or patronising, you know.
The questions you're asking are the kinds of questions artists and musicians have always had to ask through the ages, that people at the front line often don't ask.
I remember when the Minister of Defence was at some party during the time of the build up to the Iraq War. I was at a party for an EMI special kind of moment just before they sold themselves off, one of those last moments of EMI as a real company. And he was there, and I said, I don't want to meet him. I was like, and he came up to me, this is not going to go well. And the first thing he says, you know how important it is that music and art react against what we're doing, and how important it is to our culture that and I know that's a politician trying to just to make sure that nothing untoward happens, but it just goes to show you they see our world in a totally different way to the way we see their world, and there's no kind of ambiguity here. The politician and the musician are quite different beasts,
But they quite like the fact that you're against them.
But yeah, they do, yeah, because it's like, Michael Gove, when I called him, I said, Michael Gove, you're a xenophobe! And then he stopped jogging and turned around on Latimer Road and came up to me, and then, he said, I beg your pardon? And I was like, oh God, this is a bit embarrassing. I didn't expect you to stop. Anyway, we had a long conversation. As you do, because, once it becomes a human one-on-one thing, this is the point, it becomes a different, we realise we're not so polarised. We realise we've got much more in common than, I'm not saying that I have got a lot in common with Michael Gove or that I endorse him, because I don't. But I'm grown up enough to be able to say he was really polite, obviously very bright, and we had an interesting conversation.
Well, what I'm getting at is, how are we going to have the conversation?
I was less polite, in fact.
How are we as a nation supposed to have the conversation that you're saying we should have? How does that come about? Because
by, allowing our primary school children to have full access to things that are really important for their brain development, like music and like using their hands, and and then in sort of middle school, all of that, just keeping music in there and keeping drama and then keeping arts in there, keeping that, keeping daydreaming alive. We as a nation are sort of, as have many nations, we've lost the ability to daydream because we're so sort of absorbed in the social media bubble. It's actually a bubble. People say that London's a bubble, but every time you look at your phone, that's a bubble. Everyone's in a bubble.
And do you think creativity has generally been crushed out of us at the moment by this combination of technology,
well, I think
social
it's
media, the internet,
interesting.
video
It's
games?
like the Turner Prize tonight is all film. That's interesting because it's like, to go around it, it's going to take ages. I mean, there was a show a bit like that a few years ago. I can't remember the name of it, which was all film, pop-up kind of thing, related to the Hayward, which was brilliant. But this is, I'm excited to go and see it. I mean, for the first time almost ever, just because it seems like it's quite pure. And if you're going to really engage with it, you've got to spend 4.5 hours. Now that's akin to daydreaming. So, because it's not. I'm also worried about all our box sets and binge dreaming, sort of binge bubble dreaming.
Turns people into cabbages.
Well, yeah, because we all, but I do it as well, and then this comes to the end, and it's like you see you see the skip intro to the next episode, and you're like, it's like a drug, isn't it? It's just like a very gentle kind of injection of something kind of other than having to deal with shit. No, and you can really become truly modern by, ordering at Uber Eats at the same time, and I don't know, talking to your mate on the phone. We can all that stuff.
Well, people think it is literally a drug, though, don't they? I mean, that sort of the dopamine hit from
of course,
checking your messages, or
of course, but
tweets or whatever.
Yeah, I think music has seen that coming for a very long time. Is my point. So music is always a bit ahead of the curve when it comes to what's going to happen in the future. So
what's going to happen in the future?
Well, what's going to happen in the near future is that we're going to have a second referendum of some form or other.
And when people fear that will lead to
staying in Europe,
no,
I'm happy stay in Europe, but have a really long conversation afterwards about why we got ourselves in this embarrassing mess in the first place. I'd vote for that.
But a lot of people are saying, "Oh, if we have another referendum, there'll be violence in the streets. There'll be riots." Do you buy any of that?
Well, not if it's yes, if it's 48-52 again.
But do you think we're sort of fundamentally?
I mean, if it's going to stay
country?
there, then we need someone to come in and say, "Hey, I'm the third way, guys, and I can link you both." Theresa May's not going to do that, unfortunately. I mean, you've got to feel a huge amount of sympathy for her. Only in as much as she just literally can't have a life at the moment. She's without life because she's so bound to this moment. She'd probably be the most relieved person on earth when she can kind of not have to do it, I would imagine. Get back to walking in up in the mountains. And
do you think you'd write a happier record if that happened?
Theresa May in The Sound of Music.
If we stayed in the European Union.
It's called The Sound of Music. Just with a slightly different cast.
Are you enjoying this process then? What you're doing at the moment? Did you?
Well, I mean, it was amazing at the North Pier in Blackpool on Saturday. I mean, I'm not trying to hype this, but they knew every word to the whole of Maryland and sang it at full volume back at me in that theatre, which is, after 2 weeks of it being out, is quite. I mean, I'm just about at the point where I know the words now.
How does that feel?
And I wrote them, and I've been rehearsing them, and they're there. I mean, obviously, they're probably, if you had to go on stage, it would be a different matter. But the sense of the words, which is, well, it's lovely, isn't it? I mean, there's nothing like that sort of unison of it becomes a chorus then, a real chorus as opposed to the chorus of a song. It actually is the chorus, and I like that. We'll see how it goes with the the liberal elites of London now. It works up north though, that's for sure.
We ask everybody, do you have a dream way of changing the world that is really hard to deliver, that is very controversial? If you could do anything, the world according to Damon, what would it be?
Don't ask me that question. I can't reveal. Well, let's just start with no more plastic, literally. Well, if you don't save the oceans, there's not much worth. It's not really worth saving anything else. I think that's how it works within the. Maybe we can have completely dead seas and still be absolutely giving a fuck about how many likes we've got on Instagram or whatever it is. Maybe we can. Maybe that is the future. And in that case, I'm a dinosaur, and we know what happens to dinosaurs.
Damon Albarn, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.